October 1867, Tombstone, Arizona Territory. The wind that day came off the desert like a whisper of something long dead. It carried dust, dry and bitter, curling around boot heels and horse legs, snaking through the cracked timbers of buildings too young to already look so old. Elias McGraw dismounted outside the Tombstone livery yard, his boots sinking slightly into the powdery red dirt. He adjusted his coat collar and patted his mare's flank, more out of habit than affection. The streets hummed with an uneasy energy, like the town was holding its breath. Something was happening, something ugly. He hadn't meant to linger in town. A delay in grain delivery from Tucson kept him overnight, and now it was near sundown. Just a few more hours, and he'd be back in Red Hollow, back to silence and stone. But then he heard it. A crowd's murmur, low, pulsing, tense. Laughter, but the cruel kind. And from the eastern edge of town, near the old freight yard, came the sound of a man shouting over the commotion. "Gather round, gentlemen! You won't see quality stock like this again!" Elias frowned. Stock usually meant horses or cattle, but the tone didn't match.
There was something off in the voice, too oily, too eager. He followed the sound. The makeshift platform was little more than a stack of crates and timber, surrounded by 30 or 40 men, most of them sunburnt and drunk. The sort of men who didn't read newspapers and didn't want to be read about either. And there, standing atop the crates, dressed in a brown coat slick with sweat, was a man Elias recognized, Silas Birch. If the devil ran a livestock yard, Birch would have been his foreman. Years ago, Elias had seen the man in New Mexico, trading captured mescalero children to mining camps. The memory came back now, clear as gunmetal. Beside Birch stood the town's sheriff, Abel Trask. Arms crossed, eyes narrow, Trask looked more bored than bothered. No badge should have looked that at ease beside such a man. Then Elias saw what they were selling. Not livestock, not at all. 3 rows of chained figures, all Apache. Men, a few elders, several young women, even 2 children barely old enough to speak. Some were bruised, most were barefoot, and all had the weary look of those who'd learned that mercy was rationed and never guaranteed.
And near the back, chained together by the wrists, stood 2 women. Sisters, maybe. One older, tall and straight-backed despite the heat, with a face like carved obsidian, sharp angles, steady eyes. The other, younger, softer in build, but no less dignified. They were barefoot, dusty, sun-marked. But it wasn't the suffering that struck Elias. It was defiance. The older one stood like she wasn't a prisoner at all, but a warrior biding her time. Her dark eyes swept the crowd, unflinching, daring. The younger one kept her eyes low, but her fingers curled protectively around her sister's wrist. And then she saw him. Tala. That would be her name, Elias would learn later. Their eyes locked. No plea, no hope, just a silent question. Are you going to stand there and watch? A hot wind kicked up, lifting Elias's long coat. Somewhere, someone laughed about breaking in the wild ones. Another voice shouted, $50 for the tall one. He didn't move, not yet. His hand went to the scar above his belt, the one from Apache steel. He'd killed his share, back in the war. Just following orders, they'd said. He'd buried that justification long ago. He thought of Sarah, his wife.
Dead 3 years now. Thought of his unborn daughter, never given a name. Thought of the nights alone in the canyon house, staring at stone walls and praying for something to stir the dust in his soul. And still, that woman's eyes bore into him. "This isn't your fight, Elias," a voice whispered. Maybe, but neither was the war, and he'd fought it anyway. His jaw set. He stepped forward. Birch's voice cut through the dust like a whip. $50 for the tall one, I said. Do I hear 60 for the pair? Strong backs, good hands, could clean, cook, or whatever else you fine gentlemen might require. There was chuckling from the crowd, low, lewd, knowing. Elias clenched his jaw. He wasn't new to cruelty. He'd seen it at Salt River and Camp Grant, when soldiers forgot what orders were meant to be and turned them into permission for vengeance. He'd ridden with men who laughed like this, but never had he stood among them silent. The bidding climbed. 70, 80, 90. Men appraised the sisters like they were horses, inspecting teeth, shoulders, hips. Birch made jokes. Sheriff Trask didn't blink. No one else seemed to mind. Not my concern, Elias thought. But then she looked at him again, the older sister, Tala. It wasn't desperation in her eyes, it was judgment. A memory stirred, his sister Mary, small and feverish at 8 years old, clinging to him when the fever came. She died while Elias was at war. No goodbyes, just a letter weeks late and guilt that never left. Tala's eyes reminded him of Mary's in those final hours. Not in expression, but in weight. A look that said, "You know better, and if you turn away, you'll never sleep again." 100, someone called. 110. A miner shouted over the din, 125, but only if the younger one's quiet. The crowd roared with laughter. Elias stepped closer, boots grinding grit beneath. 175, came a voice to his left. Hank Calder, a man who once beat a Navajo boy near dead for stealing a boot. Elias had seen it, had done nothing. 200, Calder added, and I want both. Birch grinned like a man who'd found gold in his pan. Do I hear more? Walk away, Elias thought. Get on your horse. Ride out and forget you saw this. But his feet stayed planted. He felt the inside of his coat, where a small pouch of coins sat near his heart. Payment for a season's cattle, just enough to keep the ranch afloat through winter. 200 was already ruinous. 5 months of labor. For what? To prove you're not the coward you used to be? 250, Calder shouted. The crowd hushed. That was a sum most men wouldn't see in a year. Birch's smile widened. Going once? 300! The voice came out of Elias's own mouth before he even realized it. Clear, steady, final. Every head turned. Even Birch blinked. Well now, he chuckled, looks like we've got ourselves a new bidder. Sheriff Trask stared at Elias with something between suspicion and amusement. Didn't think McGraw had it in him. 300, Birch repeated, from Mr. Elias McGraw of Red Hollow Ranch. Do I hear more? Calder spat into the dust. Hell with that. Going once? Going twice? Don't do this, the voice whispered in Elias's mind. You're a fool. You'll lose everything for 2 strangers who just as soon hate you. He looked at Tala one last time. She didn't smile, didn't cry, but her grip on her sister's hand tightened, and for the first time, Nayeli, the younger one, raised her eyes. There was hope there, the kind that barely dared to breathe. Sold! Birch declared, slamming a piece of wood like a gavel. The crowd began to disperse, muttering. Some laughed, others whispered. Old McGraw's gone soft. Bet he's drunk. Maybe he wants himself an Indian wife, or 2. Elias ignored them all. He pushed through the crowd, pulled the coin pouch from his coat, and placed it in Birch's eager hands. Pleasure doing business, the man said, already moving on to his next lot. Elias turned toward the sisters. They stood still, wrists still chained, eyes guarded. Tala watched him as if waiting for the trick. Nayeli looked away, trembling slightly. I'm taking you home, Elias said quietly. Tala didn't answer.
But she didn't spit either. Before we dive into everything, let us know in the comments, where are you watching this video from? Connecting with viewers from all across the world has been a huge source of inspiration for us. Rosa slammed the kitchen door harder than necessary, the wood echoing like a shot. "You've lost your damn mind," she hissed, her apron streaked with flour and worry. $500, Elias!
That's winter feed, fence repair, seed for spring. Elias stood by the hearth, hat in hand, the fire casting shadows over the deep lines of his face. He didn't answer right away. "They were chained like animals," he said quietly. "That's not new," Rosa snapped. "It's wrong, yes, but don't you pretend the world just started being cruel." He looked up. "I couldn't stand there again. Not this time." Rosa's gaze softened just a touch. She'd known him too long to mistake guilt for foolishness. Still, she folded her arms. "And what now? You think you can just ride into town, buy 2 women, and bring them home like nothing happened?" "They're listed as workers, farmhands," Elias replied. "Birch gave me a paper, signed and all." She scoffed. "That paper's not worth the ink on it, and if Trask decides to make trouble—" "He already has," Elias muttered. "He was there, remember? Watching the whole thing like it was a parade." Outside, the wagon creaked to a halt. Tala and Nayeli hadn't said a word the whole ride from town. They'd sat in silence, shackled still, though Elias had covered them with a spare coat. Now, as Rosa opened the barn door, the younger one flinched from the light. The elder, Tala, stepped down slowly, eyes sweeping the land like she was memorizing every path out. "You'll stay here," Elias said, "for now. We'll call you hired help. Rosa can vouch if anyone comes asking." Tala didn't answer. He turned to Rosa. "Cut the chains. I'll fetch some water." "No," Tala said. Her voice was low, but carried weight. Elias turned. "I don't want your pity," she said, her eyes locked on his. "And I don't believe this is kindness. No white man spends $500 without expecting something back." Nayeli reached for her sister's arm, whispering something in Apache, but Tala didn't move. Elias held her gaze. "I didn't buy you," he said. "I bought your freedom. What you do with it is up to you." She narrowed her eyes. "Why?" He hesitated. "I've done worse than stand silent. This is the first thing I've done in years that felt right." Tala's expression didn't change, but she didn't spit again either. Rosa stepped forward. "You want to stay? You stay. You want to leave? We won't stop you. But eat first. Wash. Get warm." The women didn't move. Then Nayeli, quiet until now, whispered, Do you have bread?" Rosa blinked. "Yes, child. Fresh this morning. I remember bread like that, before they came for us." Tala looked down at her sister. For the first time, her face cracked, just slightly. "We'll stay tonight," she said. Elias nodded. "That's all I ask." That night, Elias sat on the porch, oil lamp flickering beside him. The stars above were bright and cold, dusting the sky with silence. Inside, Rosa helped the sisters settle into the guest loft. Elias stared at the night, his heart heavier than when he'd ridden to town. He'd opened a door and didn't know what might come through. But as he looked toward the barn, he saw something flicker. Not light, but presence. Not peace, not yet. But maybe, just maybe, the first step toward it. The night was so still, Elias could hear the mice nesting in the hayloft. The moon hung low over Red Hollow Ranch, casting long silver shadows over the weathered beams of the barn. He stood just outside the stable doors, holding a small key and a short length of cloth. Inside, Tala sat upright on a bed of straw, arms around Nayeli, who had finally drifted to sleep, her breath shallow, her face turned away from the lamplight. They hadn't eaten much, just a few bites of bread, a bowl of stew Rosa insisted on bringing herself.
Elias stepped in, boots soft against the wood. Tala heard him, of course. She never really slept, only waited with her eyes closed. "I came to take those off," he said, lifting the chain key. "You're not prisoners here." She didn't move at first, but after a long breath she extended her hands, wrists bruised where the other had rubbed raw. The key turned with a soft click. The chain clattered to the floor like thunder. Elias stepped back. "You can leave tonight if you want. I won't stop you." Tala rubbed her wrist slowly. "And if we stay?" "You stay as you are. Free. Work if you want, or don't. No expectations." "That's not how the world works," she said quietly. "There's always a price." "I already paid it," he answered, then added, softer, "and I don't expect anything more." Tala turned away, fingers tightening. "Do you think buying our chains makes you clean?" Elias paused. "No," he said, "it doesn't." She looked at him now, sharply. "Then why?" He sat slowly on a nearby bench, resting his arms on his knees. "When I was a soldier," he began, "I did things I can't undo. Followed orders, watched men cheer when they burned homes, heard mothers scream and thought it was just war." Tala's eyes narrowed. "One day I found a boy, Apache, maybe 12, tied to a post. One of ours beat him half dead. Said he was a scout, but the boy had no weapons, just a piece of cornbread in his hand." Elias's voice cracked, just a little. "I stood there, did nothing, walked away." Tala stared at him, not with pity, but with the careful gaze of someone measuring truth. "I buried that boy in silence, never told command, never told my wife, never told anyone until now." There was a long pause between them. Outside, the wind shifted. Finally, Tala spoke. "And now you want forgiveness." "No," Elias said. "I want to look God in the eye when I die, and not flinch." She turned toward Nayeli, who stirred slightly, murmuring something in her sleep. "I don't trust you," Tala said. "You shouldn't," Elias replied. "But I'm not asking for trust. I'm asking for a chance." Rosa appeared quietly at the door, holding a folded blanket. "It gets cold at dawn. Leave this." Elias stood, nodded, and stepped past her, leaving the lantern on the post. Tala didn't say thank you, but she took the blanket. In the days that followed, the house moved in quiet rhythms. Tala said little, but kept her distance. She watched how Elias walked, how he handled the horses, how he looked at the sunrise like it owed him something. Nayeli, meanwhile, began to smile, just a little. She offered to help Rosa churn butter, tried learning the names of the herbs in the kitchen garden, hummed soft songs in Apache when she thought no one was listening. The ranch began to breathe again. One night, Rosa caught Elias standing by the hearth, staring at the old rocking chair Sarah used to sit in. "You look like a man seeing ghosts," she said. He didn't deny it. "Maybe I am." The ranch woke with the sun, same as always, but something in the rhythm had changed. Elias noticed it first in the kitchen. Fresh-cut yucca roots left on the table, cleaned and bundled with careful hands. Rosa hadn't touched them. Then in the barn, his injured steer, Buckeye, had new bandages on its leg. The wrapping was tight, but done with gentleness. Next to it lay a poultice made of crushed sage and pinyon sap. He turned to Tala, who was brushing one of the horses, silent as ever. "That you're doin'?" he asked, nodding toward the barn. She didn't answer, just kept brushing, her movements slow and steady, like she was brushing off more than dust, like she was brushing away memory. "She wouldn't eat," Tala said finally, almost to the horse. "The steer, you were using the wrong mix. She needed warmth, not strength." Elias stared at her. "I thought you said you weren't here to help." She looked up, eyes calm but sharp. I said I didn't trust you. Doesn't mean I'd let an animal suffer." He grunted. "Fair enough." That afternoon, Nayeli found Rosa in the garden. She knelt carefully beside the older woman and reached out to touch the lavender. "Can I learn?" she asked. Rosa blinked. "Learn what, sweetheart?" "The plants, the ones that heal. Mama knew them, but I was too little to remember all." Rosa wiped her hands on her apron and smiled. "Of course you can." By week's end, the kitchen smelled different, richer somehow, more alive. Nayeli had taken to baking flatbreads with dried wild berries and native grains she found nearby. They were rough, not like Rosa's fluffy loaves, but Elias ate 3 in one sitting without realizing it. "I forgot food could taste like this," he muttered. Nayeli beamed. That night, as the fire crackled low, Elias sat in his usual chair while the sisters prepared tea in the corner. He watched them move, not as guests, not as intruders, but like threads woven into the wood and stone of the place. "Used to be," he said aloud, "this house had nothing but silence. Now I think it's got a heartbeat again." Tala turned, surprised. "You sure that's not just the tea boiling?" she asked, deadpan. Elias chuckled. "Could be, but I don't think it is." Later that week, as dusk colored the sky, Elias heard singing from the stables. Soft, old, almost a whisper. He followed the sound and found Nayeli there, brushing the same horse Tala had earlier. Her voice was high and clear, but fragile too, like it hadn't been used in a long time. The melody wasn't English, wasn't Spanish, Apache. Elias stood quietly at the door, not wanting to interrupt. When she finished, she looked up and saw him. "Sorry," she said, embarrassed. "Mama used to sing that to us. Tala doesn't like me to sing it here." "Why not?" Elias asked. "She says this house doesn't know our songs." He stepped closer.
Maybe it's about time it learned. Nayeli's eyes lit up. Not much, but enough. That night, as Elias lit the lanterns around the porch, Rosa joined him. "They're changing," she said. "No," Elias replied, staring out toward the dark. "We are." The knock came just after midday. 3 sharp raps, steady, deliberate. Not like a neighbor, more like a summons. Elias rose from the workbench, wiping sawdust from his hands. Rosa peered through the front window and let out a soft curse. "It's Trask." Sheriff Abel Trask stood tall and square at the porch, dust still clinging to his boots. His hat was tipped low, but his eyes were alert, scanning the house like it held secrets he already half knew. "McGraw," he greeted. "Mind if I step in?" "I'd rather you didn't," Elias replied, stepping outside and pulling the door closed behind him. "What brings you out?" "Had a complaint," Trask said, brushing a fly from his coat. "Old man Haskell says someone's been taking chickens from his property. Claims he saw 2 dark-skinned gals running off near dusk." Elias folded his arms. "And that has what to do with me?" Trask smiled thin. "You've got 2 new guests out this way, don't you?"
"Word spreads fast when $500 changes hands. They're here legally. I've got the papers." "Oh, I don't doubt it," Trask said smoothly. "But Haskell's insistent, wants a search. Says if I don't act, he'll take it to the circuit judge come harvest." Elias stepped down one stair, lowering his voice. "You and I both know Haskell couldn't tell the difference between Apache and a weathered broomstick." Trask shrugged. "Doesn't have to. Just needs noise. Folks want to feel like the law's listening." The door creaked behind them. Tala stepped out. She wore a plain working dress, dust on her sleeves, hair tied back. Her face was unreadable, but her eyes, as always, were sharp and unwavering. "I hear you have questions, Sheriff," she said calmly. Trask blinked, surprised to see her. "You speak good English," he noted. "I speak truth," she replied. "You want to accuse me? Say it plain." Trask shifted, clearly unused to being confronted so directly. "No one's accusing, miss, just asking." "Then ask me, not him," she said, nodding toward Elias. "I was in the stable all yesterday. Nayeli was in the kitchen."
We saw no chickens, no Haskell, and no crime. Trask opened his mouth, then closed it. Tala stepped forward one more pace. "And Sheriff, if a man lies, even out here where the law rides slow, doesn't that shame your badge?" The air turned still. Even the wind seemed to pause. Trask tugged at his collar. "I'll note the denial. No cause to press charges, not yet." He stepped off the porch, boots crunching gravel. "But keep them in check, McGraw. You don't want trouble." Elias didn't answer, just watched him ride off. When the dust had settled, he turned to Tala. "You didn't have to come out." She looked at him flatly. "You paid for silence, but you gave us something more." He frowned. "What's that?" "Dignity," she said. "And no one takes that from us again." Inside, Nayeli watched through the window, fingers curled around the curtain. "I was scared," she whispered. "You had reason to be," Rosa said, setting down a tray of herbs. "But look what your sister did." Nayeli's eyes glimmered. That night, Elias added wood to the fire and sat beside it long after the house had gone quiet. He turned over Tala's words again and again in his mind. "You gave us something more." He hadn't meant to, but he knew then he would protect it, not out of guilt, but out of honor. The air that evening was heavy with the smell of mesquite smoke and saddle oil. Elias sat on the porch sharpening his knife, slow and steady, the same way his father once did when thinking hard. Tala approached, not from the house but from the barn, her steps quiet but purposeful. "You always do that when you're thinking?" she asked. Elias glanced up. "Helps the mind keep still." She leaned against the post, arms crossed. "I asked Rosa why you never remarried," Tala said, voice soft but pointed. Elias paused in his work. "She tell you?" "She said you don't talk about your wife or your son." He returned to the blade, drawing it along the stone. "Wasn't a son, it was a daughter, Sarah, died of fever." "I'm sorry." "Don't be. Wasn't your doing." Silence stretched. The fire inside crackled through the windows behind them. Elias set the knife down gently. "You asked me the other night if I thought buying your chains made me clean." She nodded. "I didn't sleep after that," he admitted. "Good," she said. Not harsh, just honest. He reached for his canteen, sipped, then offered it to her. She declined. "There was a man once," Elias began, "Apache scout, named Nahai." Tala's brow lifted. She didn't interrupt. "He worked with us during the early campaigns, before the massacres started. Smart, fast, saved my life once in a canyon shootout." He stared into the dark. "Command called him a tool. I called him a friend." "What happened to him?" Tala asked, though she already knew. "One day we got bad orders. Burn a village suspected of hiding rebels. I tried to object, but no one listens to a captain out of favor." His voice cracked now. "Nahai showed up, unarmed, stood in front of the fire line. Said, 'They're not soldiers, just women and children.' One of the new recruits shot him anyway, called him a traitor." Tala looked down. "You watched." "I froze," Elias said, shame raw in his throat. "Didn't raise my rifle, didn't lower it either, just stood there." He let the words settle. Tala's face was unreadable, but her voice came quiet. "Do you still see him?" Elias nodded. "In dreams, in shadows, sometimes in my own reflection." She stepped forward, not close, but closer than before. "You tell this to many people?"
None. Then why me? He looked at her, truly looked, because I think Nakai would have liked you. Tala didn't smile, but something shifted, like a stone set down. You're not clean, Elias McGraw, she said softly. I know. But maybe you're not still the man who watched. That night she sat beside him as the fire burned low. They didn't speak further. The silence wasn't empty, it was reverent. Inside, Nayeli hummed a quiet melody from childhood, and for the first time, Elias didn't feel like a man at war with memory. He felt still. The dawn was quiet, but not gentle. Rosa stood at the kitchen sink, her hands buried in dough, when the rider came into view, just a speck against the gold-streaked sky. By the time he reached the gate, Elias had already saddled his horse and stood waiting with his rifle slung low. The man dismounted slowly, his jacket patched, face sunburnt but familiar. "Tom Lark," Elias said. "Haven't seen you since Yuma." Tom nodded grimly. "Didn't ride for catching up, Eli. What is it?" Tom pulled a folded scrap of parchment from inside his coat, worn, stained, marked with the crest of the territorial marshal's office.
"Silas Birch is back," he said. "Came through Bisbee yesterday. Has men with him this time. 6, maybe 7. No uniforms, but well armed." Elias's jaw tightened. Tom continued. "Word is he's asking about 2 girls sold without completion of transfer. Claims someone stole from him." Elias folded the paper, slow. "He's lying, of course," Tom added. "But lying don't stop bullets." Elias nodded once. "Thank you." Tom hesitated. "You gonna run?" "No," Elias said. "I've done enough running in my life." Tom looked toward the house. "You really think you can stand off Birch and a half-dozen thugs?" Elias didn't look away. "I won't be standing alone." Tom mounted again. "You've got maybe a day, 2 at best. They're riding slow, like they want you to sweat." When he was gone, Elias stood in the yard a long time, staring down the road where the dust had yet to settle. Tala found him in the barn, tightening him with straps on the saddle. "You knew he'd come back," she said. "Some part of me hoped he wouldn't." Tala glanced toward the house. "You mean to fight?" "Yes." "Why?" He looked at her. "Because they think we're still who we were."
I want them to know we're not. Tala nodded once, then walked over to the old tool chest. She pulled out a hunting bow, weathered but sturdy, and checked the string like she'd done it 1,000 times. "I don't need your protection," she said, "but I'll stand beside you." Elias smiled faintly. "I never thought you needed it, just didn't want you to have to ask." That night, the ranch was lit by lamplight and silence. Nayeli sat with Rosa, husking corn by firelight. She asked no questions, but her eyes darted often to the window. Elias cleaned the rifle that had sat unused for years. The metal gleamed under the lantern's glow, each piece handled like a memory. "I always thought if I had to fight again," he muttered, "it'd be for the land, the house." Tala sat across from him, sharpening the edge of an old hunting knife. "You're not fighting for land anymore," she said. He nodded. "No, I'm not." Outside, the coyotes howled distant. Inside, the house held its breath. The storm hadn't broken yet, but everyone inside knew. It was already coming. If you found this helpful, a quick like really helps us.
The sun was beginning to bleed into the desert when the riders came. 3 men on horseback, dusty, hardened, and carrying more than guns. They carried history, the kind Elias had tried to bury with silence and old prayers. Silas Birch rode at the center, his coat flapping like a vulture's wings. He dismounted first, slow and deliberate, as if the land itself owed him an audience. Elias stood in the yard, rifle across his arm, not raised, not lowered. "Evening, McGraw," Birch said, flashing teeth like a wolf with manners. "You've been hard to find," Elias replied. The others spread wide, forming a loose semicircle near the corral. It wasn't an ambush yet, but it could be. Birch pulled a crumpled paper from his pocket. "I've got business, legal business. That pair you're shelterin', Tala and Nayeli, they're property, transferred under contract. You broke that contract." He tossed the paper onto the dirt between them. Elias didn't move. "That's not a contract. That's a lie dressed in ink." Birch stepped closer. "Be smart, Eli. Give 'em back, and I'll forget the insult. Or give me 1,000, and I'll pretend we never met." Before Elias could answer, the door opened behind him. Tala stepped out. She wasn't dressed for war, no boots, no gun, just the same work dress dusted from chores. But her presence struck sharper than any blade. "We are not things," she said calmly. "Not cattle to be bought, not contracts to be honored. And we will not go." Birch sneered. "I don't take orders from squaws." Tala took another step forward, eyes locked with his. "And I don't take threats from cowards." The air cracked with tension. Elias reached down and picked up the paper. He looked at it, at all the false names, fake signatures, the ink meant to cage souls. Then, with one motion, he ripped it in half and let the pieces drift to the dust. "You want blood, Silas?" he said. "You'll get it, but it won't buy you anything." For a moment, no one moved. Not the men, not the horses, not even the wind. Then a distant sound, a whistle, faint but growing louder. From the south trail, a rider approached fast, bearing a silver badge that caught the last light of day. Elias didn't smile.
He just stepped back and said, "Marshal's early." The marshal's horse kicked up a trail of dust as it skidded to a stop beside the gate. Marshal Ezra Grafton, tall, wiry, eyes sharp like a desert hawk, dismounted without a word. He tipped his hat to Elias, then to Tala. "Got your letter," he said, nodding toward Rosa behind the window. "Came as quick as I could." Birch raised his voice. "Marshal, this ain't your concern. I've got legal claim, signed and witnessed." Grafton took the crumpled remnants of the torn paper from the ground. He read it silently. Then he folded it again, not carefully, but deliberately, like a thing already meant for fire. "Silas," he said, voice flat, "you filed a federal transaction with no seal, no notary, and no jurisdiction." Birch's face flushed. "They're runaways." "They're human beings," Grafton snapped, "not livestock. You want to push this? I've got 10 riders down the trail with a warrant for trafficking and fraud. You want me to whistle again?" Silence fell like a storm about to break. Birch looked around. His men shifted uneasily. Then he turned to Elias. "This ain't over, McGraw. You think this buys you forgiveness?" Elias stepped forward.
"I don't care about forgiveness," he said. "I care about doing what I didn't do 10 years ago." Tala was watching, closely, quietly. Birch spat into the dirt. "You'll die a fool." "Better than living a coward," Elias replied. The marshal motioned, and 2 riders emerged from the trees, rifles in hand. Birch's men surrendered fast, heads low. No shots fired, just hearts pounding like war drums in the silence. As Birch was led away in cuffs, he hissed one last time. "They'll never really be free. You hear me? You can't clean what's been stained." Elias turned to him one last time. "I'm not trying to clean the past," he said. "I'm trying to build something the past can't poison." Marshal Grafton touched his brim again. "You've done that today." As the sun dipped below the hills, shadows stretched long across Red Hollow. Tala stood still for a while, then said softly, "You risked your life for two people you barely know." Elias met her gaze. "No, I risked it because I finally know what life's worth." And for the first time, Tala looked at him, not as a former soldier, not as a white man, but as a man choosing something higher than survival, a man choosing truth. The morning after the arrest was still and cold. No gunfire echoed. No horses thundered across the plains. Just the steady sound of a doctor's boots on the porch and the rasp of wind in the chimney. Doc Merritt, white-haired and patient as a prayer, sat by the hearth examining Nayeli's arms under lamplight. Elias stayed nearby, silent, watching her flinch, not from pain, but memory. "These are old wounds," Merritt murmured, eyes narrowed behind thick spectacles. "Burn marks, rope scarring, bruising along the ribs." He didn't need to ask questions. The truth lay there, plain as a map drawn in hurt. "How long?" Elias asked softly. Nayeli didn't answer. Tala did. "Over a year," she said. "Since the last raid. They took us from a mission settlement near Fort Bowie." Merritt shook his head. "The bones have healed. The rest may never." He packed his kit, stood, and paused beside Elias. "Justice puts men in chains," he said, "but healing takes more than that." Elias nodded, but his hands trembled. After the doctor left, Elias stood alone in the parlor, eyes drawn to the fireplace. He saw things there, not flames, but flickers of tents burning long ago, Apache villages. Screams swallowed by musket smoke. A man named Nakai falling with arms outstretched, trying to protect the innocent. And Elias standing still, rifle down, doing nothing. The smell of cedar snapped him back. Rosa entered with a warm towel, handed it to him without a word. "She's safe now," she said. "She shouldn't have needed me to be," he replied. "Then be the reason she never needs rescuing again," Rosa said gently. Later that afternoon, Elias sat by the barn mending a fence post when Nayeli approached. She didn't speak right away, just held out a small carving, rough, imperfect, shaped like a hawk. "I made this," she whispered. "It used to be my brother's." Elias took it with reverent hands. "I'm not your brother, Nayeli." She smiled faintly. "You are now." He wanted to speak, but his throat closed tight. So instead, he placed the hawk in his pocket and looked out across the field. The wind moved through the grass like a hymn too soft for words. And for the first time in 10 years, he didn't feel haunted. He felt humbled. The sun dipped low as a figure appeared at the edge of the ranch road. He wore a blanket woven with mountain symbols and feathers braided into his hair. His face was carved by wind and wisdom, lines that didn't wrinkle but recorded. Chief Redbird. Elias stood by the corral when Rosa approached, her voice barely more than breath. He came alone. Elias nodded, wiped his hands, and walked out to meet him. They didn't shake hands. That wasn't their way. Chief Redbird studied him for a long time, his eyes reflecting fire and ash both. "You," he said at last, "were the one who stood silent when my sister's son was murdered." Elias didn't deny it. "I was," he said. The wind caught the edge of Redbird's blanket. "You hold my bloodline in your home," the chief continued. "You sleep under the same roof. You think this makes you clean?" "No," Elias replied, voice steady. "It makes me responsible." Redbird's silence deepened. "Why should I trust a man who wore the blue coat when it spilled so much red?" the chief asked, not accusing, just tired. Elias looked down, then up again. "Because I've stopped asking to be trusted," he said. "I've started asking to be useful." The fire crackled behind them. Somewhere inside, Nayeli hummed softly, a broken lullaby now sung whole. "I was not brave when it mattered," Elias said.
"I let silence be my shield. I watched good men die and worse men thrive. I can't change that. But I can die knowing I didn't hide from it anymore." Redbird stepped closer. "My niece, she trusts few, but she looks at you with eyes that have seen betrayal and does not flinch." "I don't deserve it," Elias whispered. Redbird's eyes narrowed. "No, but you've earned it." A long breath passed between them. The desert held still. Then Redbird reached into his satchel and pulled out a small bundle, wrapped in deerskin, tied with sinew. He handed it to Elias. Inside was a feather, painted red at the tip. "My sister gave this to her son the night before he went to war," the chief said. "He died protecting a village." Elias swallowed hard. "I remember." "Then remember this. You can't undo what you did, but you can carry something forward." That night they shared no more words, but the fire burned bright, and in its light a warrior gave another a second chance. The morning broke soft and golden. Rosa was already in the garden, kneeling among sprigs of sage and thyme. Nayeli sat nearby, threading beads onto a leather cord. Her movements were slower now, not from fear, but focus. Tala emerged from the barn, sleeves rolled, hands stained with oil. She'd been tending to the wagon axle since dawn. Elias watched them from the porch, coffee cooling in his hand. A week had passed since the standoff. A week since Birch had vanished behind bars and Chief Redbird left with a single nod of respect. But something heavier lingered, unspoken. That evening, as the sun dipped behind the hills, they gathered around the fire pit near the cottonwood tree. Rosa stirred beans in a kettle. Elias carved wood with his pocket knife. Nayeli leaned on Tala's shoulder, humming a tune her mother once sang. Then Nayeli spoke, soft as breath. "Brother?" Elias looked up. She smiled. "That's what I called my real brother, before he was taken, before the men came." He set the knife down slowly. "You don't have to." "But I want to," she said. "I want to remember him, and I want to call someone that name again. You protect me. You care." Tala's eyes glistened, but she said nothing. Rosa reached over, placed a hand on Elias's arm. "In some languages," she said, "the word for family means those who eat beside us, bleed with us, bury with us, and stay." Elias couldn't speak. He only nodded. Once, firmly. Later that night, he walked alone to the little wooden cross behind the barn. The one he'd carved for Clara and Luke, his wife and son, lost long ago to fever and fire. He knelt. "I don't know if I've earned it," he whispered, "but I've been given it anyway." He placed the red-tipped feather at the base of the cross. "For you and for them." Back at the house, Tala stood in the doorway. "You still talk to them?" she asked. "Every day." She hesitated, then said, "My people believe the dead walk beside us if we live in a way that honors them." Elias smiled faintly. "Then I hope they're proud." "You don't need to hope," she said. "You just need to keep walking." And for the first time, Elias didn't feel like a guest in his own home. He felt named. The desert was unusually still that evening. No dust stirred on the trail. No coyotes howled from the far ridges. Only the creak of old wood and the quiet rhythm of a house settling into its new shape. Inside, Rosa folded fresh linen. Nayeli hummed softly while brushing Tala's long dark hair. There was no fear in their hands, only gentleness. Elias stood on the porch, staring out at the last light dying behind the red hills. Footsteps approached. Chief Redbird. He carried a bundle wrapped in deerskin, same as before. "Lighter. I won't stay long," he said. "You're always welcome," Elias replied. The chief didn't sit. He stood beside Elias, watching the fading sun. "She tells me you wept," he said, voice quiet. "I did." "After 10 years?" Elias nodded. "I thought I couldn't anymore." Redbird unwrapped the bundle. Inside was a small flute, aged, cracked, but still whole. "My father carved this for me when I was a boy," he said. "I've not played it since the war." He held it out. Elias blanked. "I couldn't." "You can, and you will, because it's not mine anymore. It's for your fire now." Elias took the flute as one might take a blessing. "My niece," Redbird said, "carries scars on her back, but she carries more on her heart. She says you've helped the second begin to heal. I've only given her a place to stand. That's more than most men ever do." Silence returned, gentle and thick. Redbird turned to leave, then paused. "You didn't find God in a sermon," he said.
Or a battlefield.
Elias looked down at the flute in his hand, then back toward the house where light spilled golden across the porch. "No," he said, "I found him in a voice that called me brother." The chief gave a single nod and walked back into the dusk. That night, under a sky freckled with stars, Elias sat by the fire. Tala sat across from him, sharpening a knife. Nayeli leaned on Rosa's shoulder, asleep. He lifted the flute to his lips. The first note trembled, the second held, and the third carried out over the hills like a prayer no church ever taught. The fire crackled. He closed his eyes, not to forget, but to remember. And in that stillness, a man who once believed he'd buried all that was good in him found it again, not in triumph, but in love. If you're still watching right now, drop a 1 in the comments so I know you're still with me on this journey. Spring arrived early that year in Red Hollow. It showed itself first in the wildflowers, yellow bursts along the fence posts and violet blooms creeping through stone. Then came the air, softer, fuller, almost sweet. Tala was feeding the horses when the marshal's rider came.
A young boy from town, red-cheeked and out of breath, handed her a sealed envelope stamped with the federal crest. She didn't open it, not right away. Instead, she walked it inside, set it on the table, and stared at it like it might vanish if she blinked too long. Nayeli joined her, dirt still on her hands from the garden. "Is it?" Tala nodded once. "It's the letter." Elias stood in the doorway, watching silently. Rosa dried her hands and took a step closer. "Do you want to open it together?" Tala slid her finger under the wax and unfolded the parchment. Nayeli read aloud, slowly, her voice barely above a whisper. Pursuant to case number 48-9312, the Federal Office of Indigenous Affairs acknowledges the unlawful seizure of Redbird tribal land near Fort Bowie, dated 1851. Due to loss of ancestral claim, abuse under federal custody, and violation of protective mandates, the claimants Tala and Nayeli Redbird are awarded restitution in the amount of $36,000 USD, with full civil standing restored under Section 3 of the 1865 Reclamation Treaty. Silence followed, long, deep. Tala breathed out first. "That's more money than our tribe has ever seen in 3 generations," she murmured.
Elias said nothing. His eyes drifted from the letter to Tala, then to the open plains beyond the window. She noticed. "You think we'll leave now?" He hesitated. "It's your right." "It is," Tala said, "but we've had enough running." Nayeli reached for her hand. Rosa smiled, then quietly left the room. Tala stood, stepped toward Elias. "You gave us shelter," she said. "Then you gave us truth, and when the time came, you gave us your name." Elias blinked. "I didn't—" "You didn't say it," she interrupted, "but you wore it, like a man who knows it means something." She reached into her pocket and pulled out a simple ring, silver with a red stone set in the middle. "It was my mother's," she said, "and now I want it to be yours." She didn't kneel, didn't blush, just stood there, firelight in her eyes. "I want to build something here, with you, if you'll have me." Elias, once a man of silence, found none to offer now. He took the ring. "I will." Then, softly, as if to himself, "God help me, I will." Outside, wind carried blossoms across the porch. The desert, once a graveyard of regrets, felt suddenly like holy ground. Not because it had changed, but because they had. The day of the wedding dawned with no fanfare, only the hush of wind through mesquite and the scent of sage on the air. No grand procession, no pews, just a circle of stones near the edge of the bluff where Red Hollow overlooked the wide valley of old Apache trails. Chief Redbird stood in the center, flanked by Rosa and Marshal Grafton. His robes bore the beadwork of his clan, but his eyes held something gentler than tradition, approval. Elias wore a clean linen shirt, one Rosa had sewn years ago and never had reason to gift. His hands trembled, not from fear, but from awe. Tala stood across from him in a dress made from soft deer hide, her braids wrapped with strips of red cloth. Nayeli walked between them, carrying a clay bowl of river water. "Before this fire," the chief began, "you do not join lives, you reveal the joining already done." He dipped a feather into the water, marking Elias's hands. "You once spilled blood," he said. "Today you bind it." Then to Tala, "You are born of a people who survived fire. Today you choose to carry it forward." They said no vows, only held hands. And when Redbird nodded, Elias leaned forward, kissed her brow, and whispered, "This time I will not walk away." Applause rose from the small crowd. Marshall tipped his hat. Rosa wept silently. But it wasn't over. After the ceremony, Elias stepped forward, holding a worn map. On it, he'd drawn a new line, a circle around Red Hollow, labeled Sanctuary Grounds. He turned to the gathering. "There's land here," he said, "and stories, and pain. But now there'll be room for something more." He looked at Nayeli, for healing. He looked at Rosa, for memory. He looked at the chief, for legacy. "We're founding a place here," Elias said, "a center for those cast out, for the broken, for the ones who still sing the songs no one remembers." Rosa nodded, stepped forward with papers, already signed. "Red Hollow Community Regeneration Center," she announced. The marshal added, "with federal support and tribal recognition." Silence followed. Then applause. Then something deeper. Hope. That night, under the stars, Tala played the flute. Elias sat beside her, carving a new sign for the ranch gate. Nayeli sketched in her notebook. A garden, a lodge, a long table set for many.
At midnight, Elias stood alone by the old barn. He placed a second red feather beside the one at the cross, for the ones who were lost, and the ones now found. Rosa joined him, placing her hand on his shoulder. "Do you hear it?" she asked. "What?" "The quiet." He smiled. "Yes, it finally feels like it's saying something back." They stood there as wind wrapped around them like a benediction, and far in the distance the coyotes sang, not a cry of mourning, but of life continuing. If this story stirred something deep within, follow true Wild West stories, where the frontier isn't just a place, but a memory. Each tale echoes with loss, courage, and quiet redemption. These are not just Westerns, they are whispers from the past, reaching for the soul of who we are.